All right, so you're looking into this Enviro Infra Engineers IPO.
Yeah.
And you sent over some clips from a financial news show.
Mm-hmm.
And looks like an interview with some of the company leadership.
Right.
And it seems like you're really interested in their business model, the segments that they're operating in, the state of their order book, what the future looks like for them, of course, any risks involved.
For sure.
So let's untack all of this.
Sounds good.
One of the things that jumped out at me was that Enviro Infra's revenue, it went up like 115% in the last financial year.
It's pretty amazing, 115% growth. That's not just growth, that's a rocket launch.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah.
But I think before we get too carried away with all these numbers,
right,
it's important to understand what Enviro Infra actually does.
Yes, they're in the business of water.
Okay.
Specifically, they design, build, and maintain water and wastewater treatment plants.
Gotcha.
Primarily for government clients. So, think about all the infrastructure that keeps our cities running, the clean water we drink, and the systems that handle wastewater. That's Enviro Infra.
So they're essential for keeping things flowing, literally.
Yes.
Now, you mentioned the business model.
Yeah.
And our listener is particularly interested in that. It seems like they have a two-pronged approach.
They do. They operate on both traditional engineering procurement and construction contracts, EPC, as it's known.
EPC.
It's something called the hybrid annuity model, or HAM.
HAM.
EPC is pretty straightforward.
Okay.
Enviro Infra gets paid to design and build a plant, and that's it.
Gotcha.
A HAM, on the other hand, is a bit more complex.
Okay.
Involves a long-term partnership with the government.
So they build it, and then they stick around to make sure it runs smoothly.
Precisely. They build the water treatment plant, but then they also operate and maintain it for a fixed period.
Oh.
Typically 10 to 15 years.
Gotcha. So it's more of a continuous revenue stream.
Yeah.
Rather than a one-off payment. Okay.
And actually, a good example of that.
Yeah.
They recently snagged a major HAM project in Saharanpur.
Okay.
Worth a whopping 267 crore.
Wow.
And this was awarded in July after the June data we have in some of these other sources.
Gotcha.
Which I think gives us a good indication of their momentum.
That's a significant win for sure.
Yeah.
And speaking of wins, you mentioned order book, which I know our listener wants to explore.
Yes, as of June.
Yeah.
Their order book stood at an impressive 1,906 crore.
Okay.
To put that into perspective, that's more than double their total revenue for the entire last financial year.
Wow.
And here's the really interesting part.
Okay.
That figure only reflects the construction side of their business.
Wait, there's more.
There's a whole other layer.
Okay.
Their operations and maintenance.
Okay.
Or O&M, as it's often called.
O&M.
Order book adds another 750 crore to the mix.
Wow.
And these contracts can last for up to 15 years.
So when you combine both, you start to see the long-term revenue potential.
You really do.
So they're not just building these plants.
Right.
They're establishing a steady stream of income.
Yes.
From managing them too.
Yeah.
Very smart.
Smart.
But strong orders don't necessarily mean strong financials.
Right.
What do the sources say about their financial performance?
Yeah, well, both sources highlight that Enviro Infra boasts healthy EBITDA margins.
Yeah.
Hovering around 24%.
All right.
And what's even more impressive, this has been consistent for the past 3 years.
Okay, so consistent and healthy margins, that's definitely a good sign.
Very good sign.
But I know our listener is also keen on understanding the risks involved.
Of course.
You can't talk about financials without talking about debt, right?
Absolutely. No investment conversation is complete without looking at the debt side.
Right.
As of June, Enviro Infra had 305 crore in debt.
Okay.
Now, that might seem a bit high at first glance.
Yeah.
But it's important to understand the context.
Context is key. So break it down for us.
Yeah. Well, a large chunk of it is tied to working capital.
Okay.
Essentially, it's the money they need up front to fund their ongoing projects.
Gotcha.
Purchasing materials, paying contractors, that sort of thing.
Right.
Very common in industries like construction and infrastructure, where projects require substantial upfront investment.
So it's not necessarily a red flag.
No.
More of a characteristic of the business model.
It's like having a mortgage on a rental property.
Okay.
You have debt, but you're also generating income from that asset.
Right.
And there's another piece of the puzzle here.
Okay.
Enviro Infra actually has 186 crore tied up in fixed deposits.
Cool.
Or FDRs, as they're often called.
FDRs?
Yeah.
Hold on. So they have a chunk of cash just sitting there while they're also carrying this debt.
Right.
That seems counterintuitive.
It might seem that way, but there's a strategic reason for it.
Okay.
These FDRs serve as collateral for bank guarantees.
Gotcha.
Which are essentially a promise from the bank that Enviro Infra will fulfill its contractual obligations. It's a way of mitigating risk for their clients, especially government agencies.
So even though they have a decent amount of debt,
right,
they also have a significant cash reserve.
They do.
Albeit earmarked for a specific purpose.
Yeah.
That helps paint a clearer picture.
Yes.
Of their overall financial position.
Absolutely.
But what about those less tangible risks? The ones that aren't immediately apparent on a balance sheet?
Right. The inherent risks that come with the territory.
Yeah.
Well, one that definitely stands out is their reliance on government contracts.
Right, because any shifts in government policy, budget cuts, or even just a change in priorities could significantly impact their business.
Precisely. And in a sector like infrastructure, where projects can span years, that reliance on government stability becomes even more crucial.
It's a double-edged sword, right?
It is.
The government's focus on infrastructure development creates these opportunities.
Yeah.
But it also brings a certain level of vulnerability.
For sure.
But from what we've seen so far, Enviro Infra seems to be taking steps to manage that risk. They're diversifying their offerings with the HAM model.
Right.
They're building a strong order book.
Yes.
And they're maintaining these healthy margins.
Yes.
So let's shift gears a bit.
Okay.
And talk about their plans for the future.
Right.
What are their growth strategies?
Yeah.
And what potential opportunities are they eyeing?
That's a great question, and one that's central to evaluating any IPO. Let's delve into that right after a quick break.
Sounds good.
So Enviro Infra is clearly not content just standing still. They've outlined some pretty ambitious growth strategies.
Yeah.
And one that really jumped out at me was their foray into waste-to-energy projects.
Yes, the source has definitely highlighted that.
Yeah.
But for those who aren't familiar, can you explain what exactly waste-to-energy entails?
Sure.
And why Enviro Infra is so keen on it?
So waste-to-energy projects involve converting waste.
Okay.
Things like municipal solid waste, or even sewage sludge into usable energy.
Okay.
There are various technologies involved,
right.
From incineration and gasification to anaerobic digestion.
Gotcha.
But the end goal is the same, turning trash into treasure.
Okay.
It could be electricity, it could be heat.
Yeah.
It could even be biofuels.
Okay, so they're literally taking something we consider waste.
Right.
And turning it into a valuable resource.
Yeah.
I can see why that's appealing from both a business and an environmental standpoint.
It is.
But how does this fit into Enviro Infra's current expertise?
Yeah.
They're known for water treatment,
right,
not necessarily waste management.
That's a great point, and it highlights their strategic thinking.
Okay.
They're already dealing with a lot of waste products through their water and wastewater treatment plants, so it's a natural extension of their existing capabilities to find ways to generate value from these byproducts.
It's like closing the loop, right?
Yes.
Not just treating the water, but finding a sustainable way to manage the waste that comes from that process.
Exactly. It's a win-win. They diversify their revenue streams, they reduce their environmental footprint, and they tap into a rapidly growing market.
Yeah.
Plus, it aligns perfectly with some major government initiatives that we touched on earlier.
Right.
Like Namami Gange, which focuses on cleaning up the Ganges River, and the Jal Jeevan mission, aimed at providing clean drinking water to all rural households.
So they're not just riding the wave of these initiatives.
Right.
They're becoming a vital part of the solution.
They are.
It seems like a smart way to position themselves as the key player in this evolving landscape of infrastructure development.
Absolutely.
It's not just building a plant. It's about tackling that entire water and waste cycle.
Precisely. And this brings us to another key aspect. I think our listener was interested in the company's leadership and their vision for the future.
Right.
We have those snippets from their interview on that financial news show.
Yeah.
And I have to say, their comments really underscored this commitment to innovation and sustainability.
What specifically jumped out at you from those snippets?
Well, one thing they emphasized was their focus on in-house design capabilities.
Oh.
They even called it their USP, their unique selling proposition. They have a team of over 180 engineers who handle everything from process design to structural, electrical, and mechanical design.
So they're not just outsourcing the design work. They're keeping that expertise within the company.
Yes.
What's the advantage of that approach?
It gives them a lot more control, both in terms of quality and cost.
Okay.
They can optimize designs,
Yeah.
ensure they're incorporating the latest technologies, and stick to their sustainability principles.
It makes sense. And in a field like infrastructure,
Yeah.
where projects can be incredibly complex,
Yeah.
having that in-house expertise could be a real differentiator.
Absolutely. It's not just about designing a plant that works.
Right.
It's about designing one that works efficiently, sustainably, and meets the specific needs of the client. It also allows them to be more responsive to changes or challenges that inevitably arise during a project.
Right. Because if you're relying on outside consultants,
Yeah.
there's always that back and forth, potential delays, maybe even disagreements on the best approach.
For sure.
Having everything under one roof really streamlines that process.
It does, and they stress their commitment to using advanced technologies and incorporating those sustainable practices into their designs.
Yeah.
We talked about the solar power and biogas elements earlier, which are great examples of that commitment in action.
It's all connected, isn't it?
It is.
From those waste-to-energy projects to their focus on in-house design.
Yeah.
And incorporating those sustainable technologies, it seems like they're really trying to be at the forefront of innovation in their field.
Yeah, I think they are.
But innovation doesn't always translate into success.
True.
What did they have to say about their track record?
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to winning contracts.
Well, they claimed a 58% success rate last year when bidding for projects.
58%, that's impressive.
It's very good.
And I imagine having that in-house design team plays a role in that.
I think so.
Being able to present clients with innovative, tailored solutions probably gives them an edge over competitors who might be relying on more generic designs.
Yeah, it allows them to be more competitive both in terms of pricing and the technical aspects of their proposals.
So we've got a company with a solid track record, innovative designs, and a good win rate.
Yes.
But of course, the elephant in the room is their debt situation.
Right.
Something our listeners specifically wanted to understand. While the sources did mention a fair amount of debt, they also highlighted their good credit rating and their ability to secure financing.
Yes, their current credit rating is A-,
Okay.
which is quite respectable, especially in a sector that's often considered capital intensive.
Right.
They explained that a large portion of their debt is tied to that working capital we discussed earlier.
Yeah.
The money needed to fund ongoing projects.
And those fixed deposits we talked about also play a role, right?
They do.
You're using those as collateral for bank guarantees.
Yes.
Which are essentially a way of reassuring their clients that they're financially stable and capable of completing these projects.
Precisely. And this ties into their explanation of why their net cash flow might appear negative in the short term.
Because even if they're generating revenue, a lot of that cash is tied up in these ongoing projects or held as collateral.
Exactly.
It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's definitely something investors need to be aware of.
It's all about understanding the nuances of their financial position and how the industry dynamics play into it.
So they have a good credit rating.
Yes.
A solid order book. And a strategy for managing their cash flow.
Right.
But what about the competitive landscape?
Yeah.
Are there other major players in this space that they need to worry about?
There are always competitors, of course, but Enviro Infra seems confident in their ability to stand out. They believe that their focus on in-house design, technological innovation, and sustainable practices gives them a distinct advantage.
Right. They're not just building plants. They're building smart, efficient, and environmentally friendly plants.
That's right.
And that's becoming increasingly important, especially with government initiatives pushing for more sustainable infrastructure development.
Absolutely. They also highlighted their strong relationships with government clients, which is critical in a sector where public funding plays such a major role.
It's all about building trust and a reputation for reliability.
Yeah.
Which they seem to have done quite well.
They have.
But they're not just relying on their existing strengths, right?
Right.
The sources mentioned their interest in inorganic growth as well.
That's right. They're actively looking at acquisitions as a way to potentially expand their footprint and capabilities. They didn't mention any specific targets, but they hinted at companies with specialized equipment or cutting-edge technology that could complement their existing offerings.
So they're playing both offense and defense.
Yeah.
Growing organically through innovation and strong client relationships.
Right.
But also exploring strategic acquisitions to bolster their position in the market.
Exactly. And that brings us to the final and perhaps most crucial aspect of our deep dive.
Yes.
The potential risks that Enviro Infra faces.
Right. Because no investment is completely risk-free.
True.
What are some of the things our listeners should be aware of as they consider Enviro Infra's IPO?
Well, let's unpack the potential challenges and uncertainties that could impact Enviro Infra's future. Well, as we discussed earlier, one of the most significant risks stems from their heavy reliance on government contracts.
Right, because while the current government seems to be prioritizing infrastructure development, there's always a possibility that a future administration might have different priorities.
Exactly.
And in a sector like this, where projects can take years to complete, that kind of uncertainty can be a real concern.
A sudden change in government spending could lead to project delays, cancellations, or even renegotiated contracts.
Right. All of which could impact Enviro Infra's profitability.
And it's not just about broad policy shifts.
Right.
Even at the project level, there are risks associated with approvals permits.
Yeah.
And potential legal challenges. Infrastructure projects often face scrutiny from environmental groups or local communities. And those delays can add up.
Absolutely. Delays translate to increased costs and can even impact their ability to secure financing for future projects.
And let's not forget about those ambitious growth plans we discussed earlier.
Yeah.
Expanding geographically, taking on larger, more complex projects, and venturing into new areas like waste to energy, these all come with their own set of execution risks.
It's one thing to have a plan on paper.
Right.
It's another to actually implement it effectively.
Right.
Growing too quickly, stretching their resources too thin, or misjudging the complexities of new markets could all lead to setbacks.
It's like a balancing act, isn't it?
It is. They need to be ambitious to stay ahead of the curve, but they also need to be cautious and strategic in their execution.
Precisely. And let's not forget about the competitive landscape.
Right.
While Enviro Infra might be a leader in their current markets, the water infrastructure space is becoming increasingly crowded.
Yeah.
New players are emerging, and larger companies are looking to expand their footprint.
It's a bit like a game of musical chairs.
Yeah.
What happens when the music stops and there aren't enough projects to go around?
That's the question, isn't it? Increased competition could lead to more aggressive bidding, squeezing profit margins, and potentially impacting Enviro Infra's ability to secure those lucrative contracts. They'll need to stay agile, keep innovating, and perhaps even consider strategic partnerships to maintain their edge.
Partnerships, you say?
Yeah.
Was there anything specific mentioned in the sources about potential collaborations?
Not explicitly, but it's something worth pondering. Teaming up with a technology provider, a firm specializing in a particular type of waste-to-energy project, or even a global infrastructure player, could be a smart way to mitigate some of these risks.
It's like hedging their bets, right?
Exactly.
Not putting all their eggs in one basket.
Diversification is key, whether it's through the types of projects they take on the regions they operate in, or forming strategic alliances.
So after this deep dive, what's the takeaway for our listener who's considering Enviro Infra's IPO?
Well, it's clear that Enviro Infra is a company on the move. They have a solid track record, ambitious plans, and they're operating in a sector that's aligned with current government priorities. But as with any investment, there are risks to consider.
It's a balancing act, weighing the potential rewards against the potential downsides.
Exactly. And ultimately, the decision rests with our listener. We've provided the information, the insights, and the context, but the final call is theirs.
Right. It's important to remember that investing is a personal journey. It's about understanding your own risk tolerance, your financial goals, and making informed decisions that align with those goals. We've equipped you with the knowledge to make that decision, but the power is in your hands. And on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive. We hope you found this exploration of Enviro Infra Engineers insightful and helpful as you navigate the world of investing.
Remember, knowledge is power, and the journey of investing is an ongoing one. Stay curious, stay informed, and keep diving deep.